First off, in the spirit of full disclosure and honest reactions, I should let you all know that I am a very active Mormon. In my spare time, I play Amazing Grace on the organ and teach gospel doctrine. So if you want to start gathering your rotten fruit, this is the time. But this piece is a bit of a departure from what I usually read. I was asked to, catch my breath here. I was asked to write an article for a running magazine, Rocky Mountain Runners, in case you're going to look this up, about my experiences running a marathon on Saturday. And so that's why I have only one sock on, because I'm really worried that this toenail is going to fall off if I traumatize it any further. Oh, they said it could take up to 6 weeks, and so I'm really nervous, because it really feels weird. But back to the thing I have. It's about 1,200 words, and if I could make it around 1,000 words, it'd be even better, because the picture of me could be bigger. So if there's anything in here that you think, oh, that's really superfluous, take that out. Or if there's any jump that you think, wow, that makes no sense, then let me know, because my deadline is tomorrow. Okay. Now for the main event. I'm used to runners passing me like I'm standing still. It happens on every training run. But it's an entirely different feeling to have thousands of runners pass you like you're standing still. Aerial footage of the start line of the St. George Marathon must have looked like salmon swimming upstream around a large rock. A slow runner at my first marathon, all I wanted to do was swim upstream with the rest of the salmon, but I knew I could never keep up, not for 26.2 miles. So I plodded along until the 5-hour pacer approached from behind. I waited for the group to pass, but they kept plodding alongside me. For a few minutes, I thought I would actually run a 5-hour marathon, but then they started inching ahead of me. Instinctively, I pushed forward to keep up, but again, I knew I couldn't maintain that for 26.2 miles. I went back to my pace and watched them creep slowly into the horizon. Farewell, chatty pacer. Farewell, 79-year-old woman who ran Boston twice. Farewell, lady wearing a stuffed fox on her head. It was nice knowing you. I have learned what my body can and can't do, though, and a 5-hour marathon is the latter. I started learning my limits 10 years ago when I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, MS. In those days, my marathon was getting from the couch to the bathroom. It took all of my energy and determination to cross those few feet of carpet. Inevitably, I would pace myself too fast and run out of energy halfway. I was overwhelmed by the sudden onslaught of symptoms. The entire left side of my body was numb. I could hardly walk. The stairs were as unconquerable as Mount Everest. Not understanding the disease, I mistakenly thought I'd never walk normally again. But MS is an unpredictable disease. Crippling symptoms can stay or go, seemingly on a whim. Eventually, I learned to take a slower pace, but at the time, I was always running at full capacity and burning out quickly. On marathon day, my pace was even slower than usual because I decided, at the base of Vail Hill, to walk all of the inclines. This became less and less indulgent as the temperature in the desert climbed. The heat intensified all of my complaints. I started feeling it in my feet at mile 8. I felt my hips at mile 10, my knees at mile 13, and my ibuprofen at mile 15. I acknowledged each like children on a long trip. Are we there yet? Not yet. Eventually, they stopped clamoring for my attention. Your brain really does run the show most of the time. When I was diagnosed with MS, I had a horrible fear of needles, which was a problem because all the treatments involved needles. I decided I needed to overcome this fear. For a month, I practiced. I forced myself to look when they gave me shots, and I practiced giving shots to fruit and other objects. Finally, I just decided to do it. I sat down on the bathroom floor and prepared a spot on my thigh. I took a deep breath and slowly lowered the needle. But as soon as the needle pierced my skin, I got so scared that I pulled it back, leaving a little prick of blood as evidence. I tried again with the same results. For 45 minutes, I tried, leaving a quarter-sized spot entirely covered with tiny pricks. When I finally kept the needle in long enough to push the plunger down, I wept from sheer emotional exhaustion. Over 3,000 shots later, it is no longer a big deal. But it isn't because I've overcome my fear of needles. I simply stopped indulging the fear. I couldn't spend 45 minutes of every day in terror, so I skipped straight to shooting up and going on with my day. It was that mental fortitude that kept me going mile after mile, and I decided the secret to endurance must be simply not indulging in the desire to stop. The reward was the most amazing vistas. At one point, a runner said to me, "The best part of a marathon is the finish line." I said, "Are you kidding? This is the best part of the marathon." The St. George Marathon runs through a breathtaking section of southern Utah's desert. About halfway through, I looked at the red rock towering in the distance, felt the soul-feeding solitude, and considered myself incredibly lucky to be able to be in this moment, to have run the last 3 hours, and to be able to run 3 hours more. I am not an athlete. Even before the MS diagnosis, I wasn't one to push myself physically. When I lift heavy objects, it is to bring them from the trunk to the pantry. When I swim, it is to rescue the beach ball. When I run, it is to capture the escaping dog. Serious athleticism was never something that seemed within my realm of possibilities. I don't think I ever would have attempted to run any sort of race, much less a marathon, if I hadn't been compelled into athletics by a personal trauma. When things got overwhelming emotionally, it felt so good to pound it into the pavement. Soon I realized that it didn't just feel better emotionally, I felt much better physically. This may seem obvious, but the biggest problem I have with MS is fatigue. Who knew that expending energy would give me more energy overall, or that periodically running away from my problems would solve some of them? I started out with sprint lake triathlons, moved on to long distance bike rides, and then decided that I couldn't live in St. George and not run the marathon. The adrenaline of that decision carried me for quite a few months, but I was thoroughly terrified when I got on that 5 a.m. shuttle. I had no idea what to expect, since athleticism in general was a new concept for me. I was entirely unprepared for hitting that midpoint in the marathon, for how amazing it would be to feel so in control of my own destiny. Mary Chapin Carpenter's song, "Why Walk When You Can Fly," came up on my iPod, and I wept. In this world, there's a whole lot of trouble. In this world, there's a whole lot of pain. In this world, there's a whole lot of trouble, but a whole lot of ground to gain. Why take when you could be giving? Why watch as the world goes by? It's hard enough life to be living. Why walk when you can fly? The finish line was nowhere near as emotional as that moment. Later, my nephew asked facetiously if crossing the finish line made me feel empowered. It didn't. When you run a 6-hour marathon, the party at the finish line is over. 96% of the runners have crossed and gone home. Crossed like 2 hours earlier. Crossing the finish line seemed anticlimactic, perhaps because I was too tired to think about what it meant. Back in the red rock at the midpoint, though, I remembered every step of the journey, from the unconquerable flight of stairs to the conquered desert landscape. I remembered feeling beaten down by life and then feeling powerful. I remembered choosing to fly.